Marriage Italian Style is the 12th episode of the third season of Wings. This is directed by Andy Ackerman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a really brilliant episode, definitely very unpredictable and kind of chaotic. I had a lot of fun with it. It starts off with Antonio saying that his visa is not getting renewed and he has a month to leave the country and go back to Italy. And Brian suggests that he just finds a bride and basically gets a green card marriage. Nobody else kind of suggested that was a bad idea, really. I feel like it would have been better if the other characters were pushing back on that, but it just seemed to go, there's a suggestion, okay, let's run with it. There was no pushback, and I think that would have been a little bit better, but other than that, the rest of the episode is really great. And Brian says he'll find Antonio a bride. And he does. It's a character called Sal, played by Susan Tyrrell. Her performance is fantastic, but the character is very eccentric and maybe not the bride of choice for Antonio, but he thinks he doesn't have a choice. He's going to go ahead with it. Is there going to be a problem? Other than Antonio marrying somebody he doesn't want to marry, it seems not. However, on the day that they're scheduled to meet with the immigration officer, Sal decides to back out. And the immigration officer arrives at the airport and Antonio panics. He doesn't know what to do. So Helen jumps to his rescue. On the one hand, that was really sweet, and I'm not surprised. Helen seems like a genuine, caring person. Also sometimes kind of crazy, but generally a really caring person. But at the same time, I don't think she thought it through. And I think she knows she didn't think it through. And I don't know if this is how it works, but feel free to, provide more information. But I was quite surprised that the immigration officer was asking them questions together. For example, he'd say, how long have you been together? And they'd both just provide an answer. And I have to say, they were convincing. They both seemed to be in sync with what they were saying. But I'm pretty sure the immigration officer would have had to have spoken to them separately instead to see if their stories were aligned. So either it's unrealistic or it's very, very different to how I think things were done. If anybody has any information on that, please feel free to share. But either way, I enjoyed the scene. It was just not what I expected. And they happen to mention that they're planning this big fancy wedding, and the immigration officer invites himself to the wedding, actually, which is not exactly socially acceptable. But obviously he was doing this to try and trick them, to try and prove that they're either not having a wedding or to catch them somehow. And of course, they have to go through with it. And we cut immediately to the wedding. And it's actually in the airport, which I thought was a really lovely idea. They're having it there because that's where they first met, as the story goes, which is really sweet. And then the guests start arriving. Very funny that they paid some people to arrive, which is a bit strange because does that then suggest that Helen and Antonio don't know anybody they could have invited? Maybe not at short notice. Maybe it was too short notice. But it's a really nice atmosphere. I think they did a really great job with it. I love the costumes. Helen is having doubts. And she's having doubts partly because it's just a terrible idea, but also because she wanted her first wedding to be special, understandably. And I genuinely thought, I've seen this episode before, but I couldn't remember what happened. Terrible memory, but it works in my favour when I'm rewatching sitcoms. And I couldn't remember what happened. And it turns out that they go ahead with it. They're about to say I do. And I was so sure that in that moment, Helen was going to back out. And that's how it would end. And Antonio would have to find some other way around this. But actually, she says, I do. And they get married. And that's the end of that. Which is, well, it's surprising. But we do end with a to be continued. And I don't really have a strong recollection of the next episode. I can't really remember what happens, which is great for me. So I'm looking forward to that one quite a lot. This is a solid episode. Very, very unpredictable. Really good fun. Wedding Italian Style is absolutely a really strong episode of Wings.